We'll give folks about a minute to join online as we're waiting, and then I'll give a little introduction to the forum on the virtual meeting. Welcome everyone joining us online. We'll wait about a minute or so for people to join until we get started here. Thanks to the folks in the room bearing with us. This is our first experiment doing this hybrid format for panel discussions. We're curious ourselves of how well the virtual and in-person interaction will go. All right, well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone joining us online and in person here for the Forward in Energy Forum. Really appreciate this new format where people can join in person online anywhere around the world to learn about these really interesting topics and hear from experts that we've got here today. I'm going to turn off the live transcript here in the room so that that doesn't distract people. All right. My name is Scott Williams. I'm the Research and Education Coordinator at the Wisconsin Energy Institute. Wisconsin Energy Institute's mission is to provide leadership on campus for multidisciplinary research, education, and outreach. And these efforts are meant to accelerate the world's transition to clean energy systems and solutions. As I mentioned, you can see we're offering this event and future events both in person here in the Wisconsin Energy Institute and online. So whatever you're comfortable with, you can join either way. And the Forward in Energy Forum, something we've been doing for several years now. It's part of our efforts at WI to cultivate public understanding of energy issues. It's a monthly series that brings together experts both on and off campus to discuss the many dimensions of our global transition to cleaner energy systems. And our goal is to encourage cross-disciplinary dialogue to explore the important technical, social, political, and economic dimensions of a wide variety of clean energy innovations and solutions. So for today's forum, we really want to weave a few threads together of recent, very high, newsworthy events in the energy world. The rise in energy prices, both across the globe and here at home, connections between energy prices and inflation in general, as well as the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act as a major clean energy federal legislation. So our hope with this discussion today is to really provide a short-term and long-term outlook on energy affordability, as well as the future of clean energy. A few other announcements before we launch into today's forum. Next slide. Just wanted to highlight, for those that may not be aware, the Wisconsin Energy Institute started a new podcast this year called Propelling Women in Power. And the focus is highlighting the stories of women energy researchers at the Wisconsin Energy Institute and Great Lakes Bioenergy Research Center. It's a wonderful series to really hear about the successes and the challenges of women energy researchers and to hear their advice for young women or really anyone who's interested in a career in STEM. So you can see the QR code either in person or online, depending on where you're joining us, or the link we'll provide in the chat as well. If you want to subscribe to that, and you can use any number of podcast formats to subscribe. Second, our next forum will be held on November 1st at 4:30 p.m. And in celebration of Native American Heritage Month, our topic will be titled Power and Water, the Confluence of Energy Development and Activism on Tribal Lands. And we'll hear from a panel of experts that you see on the slide here. To discuss how Indigenous sovereign nations in Wisconsin and beyond are responding to the challenges and opportunities of energy infrastructure development on tribal lands. And in a similar vein, as we recognize Indigenous Peoples Day today, I would like to acknowledge that the land that the Wisconsin Energy Institute occupies, well, of all UW-Madison, is the ancestral home of the Ho-Chunk people, who have called this land Ejop since time immemorial. The Ho-Chunk Nation and the other 11 First Nations residing in the boundaries of present-day Wisconsin remain vibrant and strong. And notably, all this week, and all next month in November, you can see the Ho-Chunk Nation flag flying up at Baskin Hall, which serves as a reminder of the ongoing commitment through the university's Our Shared Future initiative to educate the campus community about Ho-Chunk culture and First Nations history. We recognize and respect the inherent sovereignty of the 12 First Nations that reside in the boundaries of the state of Wisconsin. And as we'll see in next month's forum, want to underscore that tribal nations are really doing some of the most important and leading work in transitioning towards clean and just energy systems. Finally, some logistical notes. We'll have opening remarks from our panelists and some Q&A with our moderator before taking audience questions. If you're in the room, you can just raise your hand and speak. We've got microphones in the room here. If you're online, please use the Q&A box, and we'll try to kind of alternate between in-person and online questions depending on how they're coming in. Finally, I mentioned the live transcript feature. That's something you can toggle in Zoom if you're joining us online. And now to introduce and moderate today's panel, pleased to introduce Mary Blanchard. Mary is the Associate Director of the Wisconsin Energy Institute, and she's been here at WI since 2014, overseeing both the day-to-day operations of WI, as well as leading strategic efforts to grow our impact on campus and around the state. She also brings 20 years of industry experience prior to joining WI, most recently as Director of Marketing and Governmental Affairs at Butter. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you so much, Scott. We appreciate that. And welcome to our panelists today. Thanks so much for being here, and thanks to you all for attending this forum. I wanted to just take a few minutes to talk about energy inflation, some basics about energy and energy inflation. I mean, I think as you likely realize that we all use energy every day. It's really fundamental to our economy and fundamental to our standards of living. And it's key to making products, buildings, producing electricity, growing and harvesting food, delivering products to consumers. Really, its uses go on and on. But energy prices, especially for though energy sources that are global commodities, can be highly volatile. And this chart this really shows that. This is over the last 25 years, year on year, energy inflation can really vary over time. And that this is from August of 2022 by the Bureau of Labor Statistics to give you a sense of the kind of energy inflation we've seen over the last year. The rate, and this is across all energy types, was about 33% in July of 2022 compared to the prior year in July of 2021, about 24% in August, so it went down slightly. In August, gasoline prices had slowed to about 25.6% increase from the prior year, from 44% increase in July. So those are some seriously high numbers. From a dollar perspective, when the pandemic began in 2020, petroleum prices plunged to less than $40 a barrel. This year, the price for petroleum has averaged at about $100 a barrel. Natural gas prices have continued to increase, going from a 30% increase to 33% in July and August of this year compared to the prior year. To give you a sense about dollar amounts, the price per million BTUs for natural gas in August of this year was about $7.88 compared to $1.63 per million BTUs. And electricity increased in August 15.8%, the most since August of 1981. So it's pretty dramatic in terms of what's happening. And overall energy inflation in the United States accounts for more than 9% of the consumer price index. So it is really important. We've been feeling the effects of these higher prices at the pump. Things were going down a little bit, and now they're kind of creeping back up. Gasoline, but we've been seeing it on our utility bills and in other goods and services. I'm really looking forward to this discussion to learn from these wonderful experts about energy inflation and the potential for the recently enacted Inflation Reduction Act to encourage businesses and consumers to invest in energy efficiency and clean energy through a variety of I'll introduce Pamela Ritger Del Rosa, who's joining us online from Milwaukee first, and then I'll introduce our two panelists who are here with us. Pamela is the Environmental Sustainability Program Manager at Milwaukee Environmental Collaboration Office, also known as ECO. She leads efforts to reduce energy use in City of Milwaukee-owned buildings, administers the PACE program, supports the Better Building Challenge, among other efforts to advance building energy efficiency and sustainability at her work at ECO. She also works on expanding the electric vehicle charging network in the City of Milwaukee and advancing the transition of municipal fleets to low emissions vehicles. She is a member of the City County Task Force on Climate and Economic Equity. And there she helps implement many recommendations of the Milwaukee Climate and Equity Plan. She's a graduate of UW's Law School, the College School of Public Affairs, and completed the Energy Analysis and Policy Certificate. College student here at UW-Madison. Welcome, Pamela. Thanks. I'd next like to introduce Greg Nemet, who's to my right, my immediate right. Dr. Nemet's research focuses on understanding the process of technological change and the ways in which public policy can affect it. Courses in public analysis or policy analysis, energy systems, and international environmental policy. Supported by an Andrew Carnegie Fellowship, Nemet published a book in 2019 entitled How Solar Energy Became Cheap, a model for low carbon innovation, and how solar voltaics provide a model for low carbon innovation. It was awarded the inaugural World Citizen Prize in Environmental Performance by APPAM in 2019 and is currently a lead author for the IPCC 6 assessment report. And finally, I'd like to introduce Dr. Corbett Granger, who's an associate professor of agriculture and applied economics at UW-Madison. Dr. Granger is an economist with research interests in environmental and natural resource economics. His current work studies the effects of environmental regulation on different demographic groups, the political economy of environmental policies, ambient air pollution monitoring, and market-based approaches to environmental management. Great, so as Scott said, what we'd like to do and what we traditionally do with the Board of Energy Forums is to have each panelist offer some initial comments. All right, I'll start with Pamela, and then we'll move on to Greg and to Corbett, the initial comments.
Great. Thank you so much, Mary, and thank you so much to the WEI for inviting me to be part of this forum today. I just generally say we are very excited, try not to be too overwhelmed by these really historic investments finally in climate action in the US, the largest investments that the US has ever made in climate action. And, generally the way I kind of like to think about these investments and way to kind of frame them is I think both the Inflation Reduction Act combined with the bilateral infrastructure law or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act really are working to fight climate change with those kind of 4 pillars of fighting climate change, making everything as energy efficient as possible, electrifying everything and having that run on renewable energy and doing that in an equitable way. And so again, both the IRA and the IIJA that came before it really do just that. In terms of my perspective, as a deputy director at the City of Milwaukee's Sustainability Office, this comes at a really opportune time for us in that we are finalizing our climate and equity plan. And so just kind of looking through the IRA and again, the bilateral infrastructure bill before this, it's really exciting to at least have a start of some of the federal investments and resources that we need to implement a lot of the recommendations that we have coming out of our climate and equity plan. I think we're really, seeing we at the city and at the county of Milwaukee as well, are understanding how, even though these investments are coming from the federal level and are critical, we're understanding how implementation at the state and local level will be really crucial to realizing the goals of this climate legislation. Just for example, I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago where we had officials from the Department of Energy talking about how there's a much greater focus in grant applications in terms of how equitable workforce efforts are going to need to be part of proposed projects to help ensure that these investments increase equity while fighting climate change. And I think, again, I feel like we're still going through the IRA, and we're still waiting for a lot of federal guidance around how these programs are going to be implemented and all of the details. But, generally it's exciting to see so many resources directed to municipalities. At the city of Milwaukee, we're looking at opportunities to install more solar on city buildings, as cities can now receive direct payments of incentives. There is funding to accelerate the electrification of our fleets, expand the public EV charging network, among other things. And, we're also looking forward to the significant resources for households to become more energy efficient and electrify and add renewables. There are direct incentives for the purchase of new and used electric vehicles, heat pumps for space and water heating, replacement of stoves and dryers with electric versions of those. So we're really excited for that. I think one challenge that we might talk about a little bit later in the panel is how do we connect residents to those opportunities, and how do we streamline those processes of benefiting from all of those incentives that are in there, especially thinking about our more underserved communities, which a lot of individuals already face a lot of barriers to existing programs. So how do we work past that and make sure that those residents in the city of Milwaukee with high energy burdens, how do we ensure that they are going to benefit and be able to take advantage of these incentives? That's something that we're really trying to think about.
Greg,
Yeah, that's great to hear the comments from Pam, and I definitely agree that this is a big deal, the Inflation Reduction Act. It's, I think to me, it's as big a deal as the Paris Agreement was for international climate policy. This is it for domestic. It's by far the biggest thing the US has ever done on climate. And I also agree with Pam that it's part of a multi-pronged strategy to accomplish the Biden administration's goal to reduce emissions by around 50% by 2030. And so we've got the Inflation Reduction Act with lots of tax credits for clean energy and the types of things that Pam mentioned. We've also got the infrastructure bill that'll help to do things like charging stations for electric vehicles. It's crucial. And then we also have the ratification of the Kigali Amendment, which reduces kind of a less prevalent but super powerful greenhouse gas called HFCs, part of the Ozone Convention Montreal Protocol. So those three things together go a long way. And some of the estimates say that, say, by 2030, we would have been about 27% below 2005 emissions levels, which is not bad. I mean, that's switching coal to natural gas, doing a lot more with renewables, and a lot with efficiency. And so that's where we would have been without the IRA. With the IRA, it's probably more like 42% with all these clean energy technologies that Pam mentioned. And that gets us closer to the 50% that we need to get to by 2030. And then all of that is trying to be in line with the Paris Agreement, in which the US, in addition to 190 other countries, agreed to reduce emissions to well below 2 degrees and make efforts to keep them from going above 1.5 degrees. And doing that means we basically have to get to net zero emissions by mid-century. So if we do this with the IRA, we're on our way. It's $370 billion. It sounds like a lot. It's over 10 years. So divide by 10 and tens of billions of dollars a year. Just to put it in perspective, if we think about the energy transition and what the whole world needs to do to get to net zero emissions by mid-century, it's between $1 and $4 trillion a year, every year for the next 30 years. So this is, 1% maybe of that amount. But the optimism comes from it being potentially catalytic. So you have this roughly $400 billion. Even just last week, an investment bank said that the Congressional Budget Office said that'll be about $400 billion of spending. They think that's about wrong by about a factor of 2. It should be more like $800 billion. If you start to account for these technologies getting better and adoption getting bigger than people expected. And then also think about private sector investment, then they're saying it's like 1.7 trillion. And then you think this is just the US. The rest of the world is also doing things. So in a lot of ways, what we're doing with the Inflation Reduction Act is just trying to keep up with what China's doing, keeping up with what Europe's doing, and then other emerging economies are investing as well. So it's a big deal. I think in terms of inflation, I'll just make a couple of comments. I think it is an inflation reduction related policy, not just a climate policy, in 3 ways. So first of all, we're talking about investments. And the idea is that we would do all these things that Pam talked about, retrofitting buildings, doing heat pumps instead of burning natural gas, replacing dryers, replacing stoves, doing renewable energy. All of that is substituting what we just talked about with fuels and natural gas and all the inflation that Mary just talked about, substituting that with capital, investments in equipment. And so if we do that and do it well, it can be reducing inflation because the cost of these technologies are going down. So that's one channel by which it reduces inflation. The second channel is just the climate damages. So if we think about what climate does to agriculture, the disruptions and all the investments we'll need to do, those are all inflationary. It's going to get more expensive to make food. It's going to get more expensive to run cities, and avoiding some of that with climate change can have a reduced impact as well. And then finally, we're not talking about doing this with extra spending or borrowing. This is reducing the deficit by increasing taxes on corporations. And so we're actually raising more taxes than what we've been spending on the climate bill. So it's reducing the deficit, and that's deflationary as well. And then just the last thing I'll say is just the next step is really about implementation. It's like, how do we do all this stuff? How do we hire all these people, get all these things to happen, get the permitting to happen? I think that's one disappointment. In the last couple of weeks, there was a permitting bill that would have been the 4th thing I would have listed on that, to say it'd be much easier to site transmission lines, maybe pipelines for CO2 and all that stuff. And that didn't get passed, and that would help. And it's probably going to be the real sticking point in the next few years if we don't figure out a way to site things more efficiently. So that's just an overview.
Thanks everybody for attending. Thanks to the organizers. When I kind of think about the Inflation Reduction Act, I think it's a lot of things, but I don't think it's really about inflation. It's certainly targeting a couple of areas where we're concerned about inflation, like energy and healthcare, but that's not really the story. I think the naming here was more about how can we get this healthcare and climate legislation passed in a polarized Congress. So maybe that's just the skeptical me. But as we're thinking about volatility of prices, increases in energy costs and so on, this bill isn't going to have kind of an immediate impact at the pump. We're not increasing refinery capacity and so on. It's kind of longer run impacts on costs. I think that the bill is trying to target. Usually when we think of inflation and government policy, we think of monetary policy, not tax credits. And today, the Nobel Prize in Economics actually went out to some macroeconomists for their work on economic crises and central banking. So as Mary mentioned, energy is one of the big things that people are worried about. The cost of energy, the statistics I think are kind of startling, how much the costs have gone up in the past couple of years. If we look at what's in the IRA, though, I don't think we're going to get relief at the pump. It's not meant to give us relief at the pump when we're paying for gasoline. And when we're talking about the clean energy transition, over time, we're hoping that we can decrease the cost of energy by moving away from fossil fuels, but this is going to take time. I do view this as a big win for the climate, especially after this summer with West Virginia versus EPA, the ruling by the Supreme Court. So I am kind of optimistic, I think, like Greg was saying. this is a way for us to meet our Paris obligation, and hopefully this spending is a catalyst. I think that's a nice way to think about it. I think I'll stop there and move on.
Great. Well, one thing that I was sort of amazed at when I was looking at the sort of list of things that's in the Inflation Reduction Act. So $9 billion for consumer home energy rebates, the tax credits that were mentioned for electric, both new and used electric vehicles, $30 billion to support manufacturing of solar panels, $10 billion to build facilities that make EVs, extension of tax credits for wind and solar, $30 billion for support the transition to clean energy. Is very broadly conceived, the $20 billion to support climate smart agriculture, $5 billion to promote healthy fire resistant forests. I mean, there's really quite a range of things that are here. Were there things that are in this act that surprised you? Are there things that you see as missing that you wish had been in the act? And then I'm just curious if you think other countries should look at this and be doing this, worldwide.
I can take it first. I think the one that you mentioned, I think was striking to me, was this $60 billion for domestic manufacturing. You mentioned 30 for solar. There's a lot of others for batteries. That's really a big change from the last 40 years of trying to reduce the barriers to trade and developing supply chains that were truly global and were way more efficient by being just in time. And this is really going in the other direction, is saying, it's way more expensive to make solar panels in Ohio or Arizona than it is in Wuxi, but we still want to do that because something about manufacturing jobs, something about maybe we'll get cut off, something about it's an industry for the future. That's a big commitment, tens of billions of dollars, and it actually is leading to investment. I mean, the weeks after the bill was passed, there were multiple announcements. Some of US companies, but a lot of Asian companies are going to start manufacturing facilities in the US because these, some of these tax credits are only eligible if you purchase goods that were made in the United States. So that was a big deal, and it's something that's being talked about in Europe as well, especially for battery and EV manufacturing. So that's a pretty big shift and a big commitment from this policy.
Do you think so? Do you feel like that industry and investors, do you think that they've been waiting for this and now they're really going to log in this area?
I'm going to defer to Greg on this question.
I mean, yeah, and I think that's what I've been surprised at, is that it do seem like some of them were waiting. I think maybe that was a benefit of Senator Manchin dithering on this. It was brutal and a roller coaster for people that were invested in this actually happening. But I think it led to a lot of contingency planning for a lot of companies. It gave them a bit of time so that when the bill actually looked like it was going to be passed, some of the things that they started working on in the spring and early summer, they were ready to go with. So I've been surprised at how much has moved ahead with some of this, especially domestic manufacturing.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and if I were an average homeowner, which I think I probably am, what would be the first steps that a homeowner should do to take advantage of this? Pam, do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I think generally when we have people calling our office to learn about energy efficiency and how to, reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and things like that, we, start with making sure that people, if they are lower income, looking into the weatherization programs that are available here in Milwaukee County, and just start with making your home as energy efficient as possible, as cheaply as you can. There are a lot of weatherization programs here in Milwaukee that people can benefit from. The next step, if people are not eligible, again, and just start with energy efficiency. People can, we refer them to our ME2 program, which is a low interest loan program to make your house more energy efficient, replace windows now, put on renewables, and even start to electrify your home. So again, just starting with energy efficiency. I think probably the next step would be looking at what is in your home and what needs to be replaced. I asked my husband the other day, how old is our furnace? Like, when when should we be looking at replacing that with a heat pump? Just looking at what just makes most economic sense for you. If you just put your furnace in last year, probably is not going to make sense to invest in a heat pump really soon. I think there's been a lot more information coming out about the health problems around having a gas burning stove as well. So that is something that we're looking at as well, replacing that with electric because of the indoor air pollution and the fact that it's emitting methane even when it's not on. So that is another area that I would start with. And, I think we're also looking at electric vehicles as well, and again, that's going to depend on how recently you purchased your, ICE car. But probably those are the areas that I, would start with. And again, just starting with energy efficiency and then some of those appliances, and then, looking at the bigger investments like heat pumps and maybe adding, I've seen, we've heard of a lot of projects around like electrifying more affordable housing or lower income households, adding a heat pump and then adding renewables to help pay for the electricity around that.
Touch on something, Pam, that you mentioned during your initial comments. I know that there's concern about making sure that low income people can access these incentives, so those who need the most help. What are your thoughts about how to do that outreach and make sure that we're able to help as many households?
This is, I think it's a perpetual issue, connecting with the people who need the most help. And something that we're thinking about, one of the ideas coming out of our climate and equity plan is to do more partnering with local trusted community and neighborhood organizations and training up some of their staff to, if it involves going door to door, or, have had a regular neighborhood meeting, just starting to talk with people about the programs that are available. And then I think, what is a kind of subsequent challenge to that is getting beyond administrative barriers to applying for these different programs. I had an idea years ago to have volunteers help people sign up for weatherization programs, but then you get into issues around, privacy of people's information and things like that. So, I think it's going to start with partnering more with those trusted community organizations, and just finding a way to kind of streamline people's eligibility for these programs instead of a person needing to apply for like we're filling out 6 different applications. Can we have some type of database where people can put in their information and then their eligibility can kind of be determined with that basic information? Just try to make that a little bit easier for people. Cause there are a lot of barriers facing people. And again, I think it's a challenge that we're going to have to continue to work through, but those are some initial ideas that we have.
I think this is one of the most important areas because energy poverty is a real thing, and prices have been going up at this rate that really forces households to make difficult decisions. Call it heat or eat. If your energy bill goes up by an additional 100% from one year to the next, you're already a cash constrained household. It's really difficult to cope with that. When we think about low income households, I agree, looking at programs for weatherization, it's kind of a first step. But one thing that I was really happy to see in this legislation was a focus on renters. And trying to incentivize the landlords to make investments in energy efficiency. That's been a challenge historically, and happy to see that there are provisions in there that hopefully will address kind of the lowest income segment of the population who usually renters.
Thanks, thank you. Well, we would encourage everyone to start submitting your questions online. Is there anyone in the audience who has a question that they'd like to ask?
You have lots of questions.
I do have a lot of questions in a lot of different areas, so I can keep going, but I just wanted to encourage people to go ahead and start submitting questions if you have them, and if anyone here has a question, please feel free to raise your hand, and then we can switch to you. I know that, Greg, you talked a little bit about the supply chain of how the IRA is encouraging, a domestic supply chain in batteries and in other areas. Do we think that this is going to increase demand enough for things like heat pumps, that there might be supply chain constraints on the equipment and the other pieces that we're looking to deploy?
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, definitely. I mean, I think in the next year or two, may not be the time to, from a very private, personal perspective. I think I'm hoping my natural gas heater makes it for a couple more years, because I think in a couple of years from now, I was thinking your question was about, is the supply chain going to react to this by investing in developing manufacturing capability and training new people? And I think it will, because it's 10 years and it's big. And those two things make it worthwhile to train people, to design new facilities. So yeah, I think the next year or two, it's going to be more of the same. It's just hard to get stuff right now, all kinds of stuff for any kind of home equipment. And so people have to make compromises about performance or model. But I think with this, you actually expand the market so much that there'll be new equipment coming online. So I think in a couple of years, it's really going to open up things. But I think the real issue is going to be people. We're going to need a lot of people installing heat pumps, installing solar panels, installing EV chargers, and doing all that stuff that is generally like local effort. It takes some training, but it definitely takes people. And so that's the part that I hope we can really work on. It's interesting because I feel like 10 years ago, there was a climate bill, 12 years ago, there was a climate bill, and it was a big thing was about how many jobs it's going to create. And now it's almost like it's the opposite. It's like, well, we don't want to use too many jobs for this transition because it's going to be inflationary if we do that. And so it's really changed, but I think that's a real constraint now, is having people available to do all this work. It's going to be a lot.
So when we think about these, you were mentioning before the idea that this is maybe 1%. Is that
yeah, something like that.
1%.
Yeah.
And I once heard on a podcast the idea that the energy transition would be 2%, like 2% of GDP.
Okay.
I don't know if that number's right or not.
Yeah.
It's just something that I've heard.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if you think that is the right number, for what it would take. But then as we think about the risks of the volatility, the risks of the climate change, it seems like that seems compared to the risks that we're facing of adaptation and kind of destruction that we're just seeing. Hurricane Ian.
Right. Yeah, it's good to put that in perspective. Yeah, the world economy is like $120 trillion, and we're talking about $1 to $4 trillion every year for clean energy transition. So $4 trillion is a lot of money, but it's 1 to 4%. So, and we're talking about the IRA is 1% of that. So it's small on its own, but it could get bigger for some of these reasons we talked about. But yeah, it's an investment really to manage climate change, to develop these industries, and maybe to have a deflationary effect, as Corbett said, over the longer term.
We do have a question online from Glenn. The speaker just mentioned training. Are there programs in the bill or local plans to incorporate this into the community college curricula if they're not already? And the person says, I'm a community college geology professor. Yeah,
that's where I need to delve deeper into the tax code and read it. But I think You talked about, Mary, some billions of dollars for transition for communities, and that is the type of thing they're talking about when they say transition, is training people that have been heavily involved in the fossil fuel industry to learn new skills and start applying their knowledge from their old industry and new knowledge that they get through training to some of these growing industries that are.
So I think that was the jobs aspect of this bill. Was part of it was providing an alternative to people who were employed in mining in West Virginia or elsewhere in industries related to fossil fuels. But I also agree with Greg that we're going to need a lot more than that. And with one of my concerns is labor markets are already tight. If you go around, most businesses are hiring, most businesses aren't able to hire. And that's one of the constraints that we're seeing in production right now too. And so I hope that there are additional provisions to make sure that we do have enough training so that it's not that we're out of people, short of people to.
Yeah, I would agree, Mary. That's something that we're talking about as well is, yeah, how do we get enough people to do the energy efficiency improvements and install the solar and, you know, install and maintain the EV chargers and all of this. I think if there's anything that's missing from the IRA, it's probably more workforce training provisions and probably provisions. I don't know if that would go directly to, you know, technical colleges or what have you. But I think I agree that's something we're looking at. Just an implementation of our, you know, climate and equity plan is just having enough workers, and then making sure that, or, you know, what would be ideal is to have those who are unemployed and underemployed in our community, which, you know, unfortunately in certain zip codes of Milwaukee, that is a lot of able-bodied adults. How do we bring them more into the labor force and being able to get these, you know, decent paying middle-class jobs? That would be the ideal, but it's a big challenge creating, I think, those pipelines of, you know, training through to on-the-job experience, you know, through to eventually, you know, maybe opening your own business or becoming an electrician or what have you. That is another piece of the puzzle here.
What do you think about the effect of oil price increases magnifying the effect of, or the consequences of this bill? I would think that oil price increases would really juice with the Exxon Mobils and other fossil fuel companies to be transitioning much more quickly with the anticipation of these price differences growing. You know, they're not going to grow forever. They can't because of you know, economic sensibility, but that oil price increase is accomplishing quite a bit of what we're trying to accomplish anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why this investment bank said the Congressional Budget Office really underestimates how much is going to get spent on all these subsidies, because I don't never really know about ExxonMobil, but certainly for someone deciding on the next vehicle, if you've got a $7,500 credit to go electric vehicle, and gasoline you see as $4 a gallon, probably staying like that for a while, then there's a lot more reasons why people would want to go electric instead of, so yeah, the oil price really does, like you said, it like boosts this in a big way.
You know, and help me, I can't remember, for the electric vehicle credit, in the past, they had been reduced by the number of vehicles. There was a point where it would phase out once a particular manufacturer had sold that many vehicles. That's not the case with this credit, right?
Yeah.
You know, so it is being implemented differently. So you just get that 7,500. It's not, phasing out where you'll get less over time.
Yeah.
And then be eliminated overall, which I think Tesla, for example, sold out its credit some years ago.
Right, so they don't have that anymore, but what they do now have is that local content requirement. Like, this is stuff that, I don't know, like, China used to do like 20 years ago, and now the US is like, oh yeah, we want to do that too. And so you get a much bigger credit if your car is made in the US, like by a factor of 2. So that's what's a bit different now.
I would just think that the market opportunity, the opportunity to develop a new
Yeah.
business would drive a lot. And, this is going to feed on itself, in other words.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't look to ExxonMobil doing that though, because they have this probably, once every 20-year opportunity to make a lot of money over the next couple of years. So they're probably going to be early and doing as much of that as they can. But on the other side,
They'd be looking ahead as well, though. I'm going to say that I come out of that industry, but
yeah, okay, yeah, maybe. But I think on the demand side, like people purchasing vehicles, it's all, yeah, I think you're totally right. It's going to be high energy prices.
There's a question online, and then I'll get to you. Okay. So the question online from David is, the cost of producing electricity from solar panels has been dropping in recent years. With the need for battery storage to be built along with the solar panels, how do you see the cost of this storage, especially lithium, trending in the coming years?
That one's the same. It's even more. Like this is what I do with IPCC, is looking at all these technology costs. Solar's come down by 90% last 10 years. Batteries is even more than that. So like the small like Nissan Leaf, that battery 10 years ago was $40,000 just for the battery, and then added another 10 for car. But that 40,000, it's not 4,000. It's like completely transformative, and it just keeps going cheaper. Not this year, probably, with supply chain and access to minerals might be an issue. But all the reasons that solar has come down in cost, batteries doing the same thing. It's just doing this really simple, like little pack that's in here and there, and just doing the exact same thing. Nothing new, just figure out ways to make them better and cheaper and many more of them, and just string them together. It's not that complicated, and the room for making them cheaper and cheaper seems to just keep going. So yeah, I think the battery part is just really makes things possible that weren't, like what we were just talking about.
But are you concerned about the environmental impacts of the mining of the battery material? The U.S. hasn't traditionally had that as a major industry, and I know there's been big fights up in the boundary waters for mine that have been planned for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Big issue with environmental issues of mining, human rights. I mean, just think about like how cobalt is mined. It's like kids sneaking into these mines and digging it out. It's super valuable. Like that's horrible. So you could really do it badly, but you don't have to do it badly. And so that's kind of what's.
I have a question about investments timescale. UW's John R. Commons a century ago realized that to build a rural electric infrastructure would take immense timescale investments and proposed successfully, because you're having seen it happen, subsidizing over 20, 30-year horizons, the investment in the technology to make it happen. So my question is, are you seeing coming out of this Inflation Reduction Act, do you see any long-term timescale investments, legislation likely to be coming out of this? I was throwing that at Corbin, actually.
So I have no idea. I think that's a really good question. But I'm trying to predict what this Congress is going to do is well beyond what I'm guessing.
Okay, so I just wondering, is any of a sense we're seeing large dollar numbers, but the timescale commitments, are you seeing any of these in this legislation or?
Well, 10 years is not bad, considering that we used to do tax credits for 18 months. I remember sitting in my office in December of 2012, watching those wind turbines being built across the lake. And they were hard at work in this nasty weather at the end of December because they knew tax credits would expire. And that's kind of how we've done things. Like, it's silly because you're not going to like train people and build up a manufacturing facility for an 18-month bonus. But if it's a 10-year program, like that's what we have now, I think that things moving in the right direction. So yeah, it's not 20 to 30 years, but it's quite a bit of runway.
Do you think that they sometimes, is there any chance, I guess I'd say it this way, that they would make it for the lifetime of the, right? You know, like commit, because obviously the thing that people always talk about, right, is how the oil industry has permanent incentives, right? You know, that don't ever expire, and they've had them for more than 100 years. So it's not a brand new industry, right? It doesn't really need it to get going, but they have these and permanent, so there's that certainty. But it seems like, especially when you're talking about manufacturing facilities or things like wind turbines, and over the lifetime of that would make a lot of sense to provide that certainty.
Yeah.
For developers.
Yeah, we're not doing that. Like most of these tax credits are upfront, so you're getting 30% off your solar panels. So then, you know, the rest of the time, whatever happens with net metering or electric rates, it's your risk. So yeah, it's not like a German tariff where you guarantee the price. Yeah, it's not quite like that. But yeah, but in terms of, you know, getting manufacturing to happen and getting installers to get smart and get scaled up, like this is doing that. You know, it's not going away next year, it's 10 years. And the other thing is, unlike other stuff that's come up recently, you know, Corbett mentioned the West Virginia Supreme Court case. This is tax code that's been passed by Congress. This is not an executive order, it's not the EPA. This is like something that would be really hard to change. So I think that part of it gives it a lot of credibility and long-term impact. And, you know, a lot of other things that have been tried just for political reasons is the only realistic thing to do.
And I'll just say, from when I used to visit DC a lot on behalf of the startup company where I worked, anything to do with taxes was like the big time, right? Like that's major league when it comes to what's going on in DC, right? Is to influence that. And that there would be there, for example, in the biofuel space, there's tax benefits for biomass-based diesel that they will let expire, but then they'll renew them and make it retroactive. So the people who, like, once you have this constituency that's depending on it, very hard for them to eliminate it, you know. And not that they haven't, because it's really did for ethanol incentives and that sort of thing. But there can be this driver, and in a way, it just seems crazy to do it year by year, because then it's just bonus money to the.
Yeah.
They can't count on it. It's just bonus money.
Well, and that's a good point you raised about like the political economy aspect of this. I mean, think this goes till 2032 or so, but by 2032, there's going to be a lot of heat pump installers and electric vehicle manufacturers and probably new things that we haven't really taken too seriously so far. It'll be lobbying hard to say, oh yeah, we need more of that, or let's modernize it. You know, like that's so you're right. Like that's not. It's got a small voice now, but it's going to have a much louder voice.
Right. This way, I'm sure the solar folks are happy that we're back up to 30%, right, from 26%, and that as well. Now, one thing that as we're changing, you know, now more people are having solar on their roofs. Just in my own neighborhood, more people have gotten solar as well. That we're starting to generate energy at different times. I've started reading how they're telling people, don't charge up your EV at night, and other times during the day, so that, you know, maybe it's solar that's doing that. Do you see there being changes in this? And there's also these concerns, for example, that we've always been so focused on heating in the winter, right? Like that's the priority. Natural gas is going to go to where it's needed to heat, for example. But now in the summertime, it's getting so hot in some places that we really need to make sure that there are cooling centers. I'm just curious if you have any perspectives on how this landscape might change about the way we use it, given the growing prevalence of
Yeah, I mean, Pam talked about electrifying everything, and that's, that's a pretty big difference. Yeah, just the first thing I'd say is like, if it turns out our big issue is electricity for cooling in the summer, and we've got, I think I saw this last week, 8 gigawatts of solar in the queue in Wisconsin, that works pretty well. You don't have to tell people, don't cool in the afternoon because we need it. No, we'll have a lot of electricity on a summer afternoon, so I'm actually all right.
In Germany, there's a feed-in tariffs and other things, but they've actually been asking some of those days for people to turn up VNC. And
Oh, interesting.
yeah, they were producing enough renewables that they're trying to using it.
Yeah.
Did you have anything to add about the summer cooling?
I think one thing that as we're increasingly using electricity for more things, for more of our uses, I think the resiliency of the grid is going to become increasingly important. I think, I ideally more battery storage, more use of microgrids, so that we don't have just one system that if it goes down, people are disconnected from, their ability to drive places or, power their air conditioner or what have you. I just think that, that grid reliability and resilience is going to become increasingly important as we're more reliant, on electricity.
Do you have any perspectives about the use of microgrids and the change?
Yeah, I think that's all part of this, I think there's a lot of work going on here. I mean, batteries, we talked about already, are real and getting deployed in a big way in a lot of places around the country, including here. And, it used to be batteries were used to, help maintain the frequency of the power and get everything smooth. And now people are using batteries for price arbitrage to say, we have a lot of solar power in the afternoon. There's going to be a lot of demand at 7 p.m. We're going to make money by buying power in the afternoon and selling it in the evening, and that's happening. And so that smooths stuff out and makes it work better. So there'll be more needed like that, probably some longer term solutions as well. But that stuff is things we talked about could happen in the future, but a few years ago. But now it's people are investing and deploying it in a big way, and it seems to be working pretty well.
Yeah. It's interesting too to think about things like the new, I forget what the name of it is, the Ford truck, where you could attach into your house to be the battery for your house, right? You don't need a separate battery, but instead you could have this vehicle for that purpose.
I was just going to mention that, Mary. I think that was very smart, as if that truck wasn't already desirable enough. It can provide backup power for your home. So, I think there's going to be continued demand for that F-150, that electric F-150, and, hopefully more automakers are gonna look at that as a additional benefit to make changing to an EV even more attractive.
I don't have a good sense of whether all the automakers, I know that they have these objectives for when they're going to be solely EV, but whether that's part of that, I would imagine so, that it's part of their plans as well.
Yeah.
With California's announcement of 2030, where they're banning the sale of new gas cars, I think that's going to be a huge push on auto manufacturers. We've seen that with other California regulations, when they had more stringent emission standards that pushed automakers to make cars for the rest of the US that were much more emissions friendly. And my hope is, this will be a big push. California's a big enough player that they go in alone, they can move markets.
Yeah, no, and they've been leading the way on so many things. Their low carbon fuel standard, quite honestly, makes the market for renewable fuels, right? RFS by itself is the renewable fuel standard is not enough. So it's two things together make that happen. So as we think about Go ahead, Kim.
Oh, no, I was gonna say, I think, and New York passed a similar law, I think just last week, to stop the sale of internal combustion engines. I think it's by 2035. But, you know, I think from the municipal perspective, that just puts more, more pressure and I think more need to build out our charging networks and have more opportunities for, you know, to facilitate people getting chargers at home, making it increasingly, you know, more affordable for people to do that. Because, you know, I'm happy about the electric vehicle transition, but I'm also concerned with the speed of the transition, you know, the groups of people that will be left behind. And you could have a very, you know, you could have a very unequal situation where, you know, lower income segments of the population are not able to transition to EVs. And then maybe the price of gas is as high as it is or higher, but there's less concern about bringing those costs down if more affluent people are not using gas anymore. So I think, you know, I'm really happy with this transition, but I was at a conference earlier or last week where the title of the session was like EV panic. You know, it's like really coming so fast and furious, the dollars from the federal government and, you know, figuring out how to build a EV charging network that is equitable and accessible and figuring out the pricing around that and, you know, all of the considerations around that, you know, so it's great, but I think our communities are going to have to catch up with that very quickly.
As we look to the coming year, right, we know that Europe is facing a lot of challenges with access to natural gas. And I think in Britain, they're going to cap prices for homeowners and maybe businesses to try to help those people in the winter time. Do you have any predictions for how like how inflation, what might happen to both petroleum and natural gas prices over the coming year, considering the geopolitical constraints that are going on, and OPEC is going to reduce production as well. So there are a range of things that are happening. Any thoughts about the coming year?
Well, I think it's instructive to look to Europe. Like I just came back from Austria on Thursday, and it's a different world there. Like everybody in Austria just got $500 in their bank account last week for energy prices, but it's just flat and don't have to use it on energy. But the idea is like, this is painful and this is one way to help. Germany just announced they were going to spend 200 billion euros, $200 billion on energy. The government's going to spend on energy. That's 50% of the federal budget in Germany. This year is going to go on energy, and they told everybody that you don't have to pay anything in December for your household energy bills. It's becoming not just an economic issue, it's going to be a political one, and it's going to be one in which surely governments are going to fall, because wholesale prices in energy right now in Europe, they're being paid, and they're paying Qatar for gas, they're paying the US for gas, and it's going to affect us too, because it's going to get more and more profitable, especially as places like Germany start opening liquefied natural gas import facilities. They've got 4 planned. That's just going to suck a lot of gas from the US to Germany, where the price difference is it's like a factor of 5 right now. So we're going to end up feeling it, but it's going to hit Europe first, and it's really transformative what's happening in Europe right now. So yeah, I mean, people were talking about buying electric blankets and space heater in big cities, and people that didn't live in cities are stocking up on firewood and stuff like that. It's a pretty intense anticipation. And the other thing I heard is that people are much more concerned about 2024 because there is actually natural gas storage that's been built up over the last 6 months. But because the Nord Stream 2 pipelines, 3 of them are shut down, going to be almost impossible to refill that storage. Yeah, this is probably a longer term issue that's definitely going to ripple into the US as well.
lots of governments are looking at ways to try to ease the household burdens. Norway has been kind of opened up and has been selling a lot of electricity to Europe. And historically, they hadn't done that. Electricity in Norway is almost all from hydro. And so electricity had been really cheap. After the invasion in Ukraine, they started transmitting in much larger quantities electricity to Europe. And all of a sudden, electricity was getting expensive in Norway, and they did something similar to Austria, just flat. Here's some money to help your burden. Yeah, it's not going away, especially looking at this next winter. Worrisome.
I'm just curious that in Norway, are their hydro facilities working fine? Because here in the US, some are getting the water levels too low for the hydro plants to even.
Oh yeah, I haven't heard problems about generation being an issue. Yeah. From what I understand, it's more that they're exporting where they weren't exporting before.
Sure.
Just driven up domestic prices.
Sure. Now, how might, if natural gas prices increase here, how does that flow through in terms of utility prices? You know, we live in a regulated state, not Texas where it's unregulated, but how does that how does it happen? Does the utility go to the PSC, the Public Service Commission, to request actual money because the natural is that, and then I don't know how long that takes to take effect.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the utilities in Wisconsin will initiate rate cases at the Public Service Commission and say, cost of natural gas is now 2 times. We think it'll be 3 times next year. And so you need to raise natural gas rate, but also a lot of electricity comes from natural gas. And so that needs to go up as well. And then the 3 commissioners then decide yes or no, that's okay, or it's not. Yeah. Hard to see how the prices go up because if they don't,
have to follow.
yeah.
What does that mean, Pam, for our lower income members? You know, so I think in the winter maybe they don't have to pay their utility bill. There's like I guess they won't be shut off, right? I guess that's the point, right? And then they pay their bills in the spring. Is that what happens? Like, what will happen if prices go up? I know we talked earlier about how sometimes it's the heater, heat your house, or I know that it can be hard to just pay all your bills at once. Like, that's just not possible for many families. Do you have any thoughts about how it might these potential price increases might impact them over time?
You know, I think that's true. The households can't have their energy cut off, I think, between October 1st and I think end of April of every year. But I think, you know, we're going to see a lot of people with utility debt coming out of this. I think, you know, during the pandemic, we similarly saw a lot of utility debt coming out of that just because, you know, people were losing their jobs and able to pay their bills. And, you know, ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act, was able to provide, you know, some assistance around that. You know, but again, I think we're going to have to do, you know, more and a better job of pushing people towards energy assistance programs that exist. And at least in the city and county of Milwaukee, people actually have to sign up for energy assistance to then be routed through to weatherization services. So, you know, hopefully this will induce more people to kind of go down that route. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see how electrification plays into this, you know, because where City of Milwaukee is a partner on a kind of pilot program now with one of the weatherization agencies here in Milwaukee, the Social Development Commission, to, you know, start looking at getting, you know, a number of homes here in Milwaukee electrification ready. And then I think we're still trying to figure out how the IRA money can play into this, but with that additional investment, we can start to, you know, maybe look at weatherizing homes with heat pumps at some point, which would, you know, then at least I think reduce that volatility of natural gas prices, and, you know, have some more stability in terms of having those heat pumps that run on electricity, and that can provide that additional benefit of cooling as well. But those are some things that we're just starting to get into, like pilot programs around electrification, and, you know, trying to yeah, just have more uptake in the system by routing those types of heat pump upgrades through like government programs. So sorry, I know that was a little all over the place, but if anything, I think we're just going to have to do more and better of linking people with the resources that are available.
Are those resources mostly local, or are there state resources as well?
I believe that they are state resources that are then administered through the county. So there's different, I think, you know, there are different websites. I think it's Get Warm MKE here, that, you know, is just an attempt to try to get people to kind of remember those resources that are out there, and, you know, try connect with social servants, agencies that can kind of get them going with that energy assistance, which then, if they qualify for that, they can get, you know, payment of their utility bills for a certain amount of time. But then going through that energy assistance program, they get routed to the weatherization agencies, and then they look at the weatherization agency will work with the household to see if they can qualify for insulation, replacement of a furnace, or things like that. But I believe it's state funding that comes down and then is administered through the county and through those social service agencies.
We're nearing 6 o'clock.
I have one question, going back to, like, you talked about a big like part of the Inflation Reduction Act was to like bring back like renewable investments and like industry to the domestic, like to America. I'm from Sweden, and we have a big problem in, like, there are big economical incentives to build the wind power and more Sweden, but more than 50% of the investments get like cancelled because we have this not in my backyard problem. How does it look like here in the US? Is it a problem that like local politicians or like groups like do not want this to happen, or like?
Yeah, so NIMBY is definitely a thing here as well. There's pushback against projects of all types. Everybody wants renewable energy, but you might not want it obstructing your beautiful view. So that's certainly a challenge. I don't know if it's been big enough that it's impacted the total amount of spending that's gone toward it, but it's certainly, there are political factors that affect where the projects end up.
Yeah, I would say particularly on transmission, that's something that's very sensitive. It has been in our state in Wisconsin a lot. But if you think about trying to use what all this spending for tax credits would be toward, more renewables, electrifying transportation, doing even more batteries, you know, that depends on more power moving around. Like it's windy in North Dakota, it's sunny in the Southwest, people live in different places. And there's no way you can get around doing that without moving a lot of electricity around. So yeah, I think it's a huge issue, and that, in addition to probably the labor constraints, is another kind of key sensitivity that's going to be really important to deal with. So yeah, I hope we.
I agree 100%. I was happy to see the infrastructure bill, but I wish it were much larger. I worry about transmission, that we're not spending enough on it. Updating the grid, and like Greg said, permitting is a concern of mine too. Wish we could speed that up.
Last question.
What about the effect on immigration policy
The effective
of this bill and this development on immigration policy?
I haven't thought about that. What's the link that you're thinking of?
We need people to work. There are lots of people who want to work in this country. They just don't happen to live here right now.
This will, I think, add more pressure to that situation. I agree. Yeah.
Thank you all very much for coming today, and sincere thanks to our panelists for attending, for bringing their. So thank you again, and then the next one is November 1st. Is
Yeah,
that correct?
next forum will be November 1st, here in this room and online again, 4:30. And yeah, we've got it on the screen there, the confluence of energy development and activism on tribal land. So see you all there for that. Thanks,
Great.
everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
Take care.
Nice session. Hey, I just want to say hi.
Yeah, right.
Dylan Craig. Yeah, good to see you. About 5 years ago, bro.
No, what do you say?
I always think about. Very much waiting to see what happens.